Hello and welcome to Liar Liar, a special edition of Banfield from CrimeCon 2025 in Denver, Colorado. Tonight we are all about one thing, maybe I hope the only thing, that you and I have in common with killers and con artists and kidnappers and counterfeiters and crack dealers and, for that matter, Sunday school teachers and tree surgeons. We are all, every one of us, liars. All of us. I'd love to spend my only day off at your great niece's poetry slam. Lie. Of course that suit doesn't make your butt look big. Big lie. Your homemade gluten-free coconut flour sesame cookies are delicious. Nope, not even close. But lying about cookies and clothes doesn't make us criminals. Lying about a crime, that's different. And that can land you in hot water. But tonight, you are in for some of the foulest, most shameless lies from some of the foulest, most shameless liars of recent decades. Crooks who took the true out of true crime. Like murderers who completely invented so-called suspects to throw the cops off their trail, or claimed that their victims were just about to kill them. You know, like the woman who zipped her boyfriend into a suitcase and let him slowly suffocate. You'll also meet not one, but three world-class con artists whose lies were so convincing and so appealing, their victims practically begged for the chance to hand over all their money. I've even got one liar who tried to convince police and the world that he was more guilty than he really was. Don't ask. But up first, three of the most exquisite liars of all time. Murderers who not only claimed that they didn't do it, they claimed the murders didn't even happen. Spoiler alert, the murders did happen. Do you remember Chris Watts? Because I sure do. This guy was at home in Frederick, Colorado with the family dog when the police showed up to check in on his wife, Shanann. Shanann had just returned home from a business trip to Arizona, and she'd walked in the front door of their house very early, like really early, just before 2 a.m. The date was August 13th, 2018, and Shanann had scheduled at least 2 appointments that following day, a doctor's appointment and a business meeting. When she missed both of them and stopped responding to text messages, a friend got worried and reported her missing. When officers arrived at their front door, her husband, Chris Watts, gave them permission to search the house and come on inside. Inside, police found Shanann's purse with her keys and prescription medicine inside. They found Shanann's phone wedged in between the sofa cushions, and her wedding ring was on the nightstand. Shanann's car was in the garage with the car seats for the couple's 2 preschoolers, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, still strapped in. But Mom and the little girls were nowhere to be found. The man of the house told police that he had no idea where his family was and hadn't seen his wife since the previous morning when he left for work. He later gave several TV interviews pleading for the safe return of his pregnant wife and 2 little daughters. Liar. 2 days after Shanann, Celeste, and Bella Watts went missing, Chris Watts agreed to take a polygraph test. And he failed it. And then he changed his story and admitted that he'd killed his wife, Shanann, but only because he said he was blinded by rage after Shanann had smothered their children.
I didn't hear anything. When I was downstairs, I came back up and they were gone. I don't know, like, talking to her about that. Talking to her about separation and everything, about, like, she lost I don't know, like, what else to say, like, I freaked out. I had it.
Lies. All of it. Filthy, dirty lies from a filthy, dirty human. And that's being charitable because Chris Watts had also killed his own 2 baby daughters. And the very next day, he told detectives where to find their bodies at the oil field where he worked, 20 miles away from their family home. Those 2 little girls had been smothered till they died and then were stuffed into a pair of crude oil storage tanks at the remote site. Their pregnant mom, Shanann, she was buried in a shallow grave nearby. It took 3 months, but Chris Watts finally copped to all of his lies. He was the one behind all 3 of the murders. He admitted so in a plea deal, a deal that spared him the death penalty. So instead, Chris Watts got 5 life sentences, 3 consecutive, 2 concurrent. But his lies didn't stop there, if you can believe it. In letters from prison, Chris Watts wrote that he's not really to blame for the murders because he was tempted by other women in his life. Reporter Steve Helling saw those letters and came on our show to talk about them.
He couches everything that he writes in this spiritual Christianity type of thing that isn't like any Christianity that I know, that basically he doesn't take personal responsibility. He was always tempted. He was always weak. Somebody was always pulling him aside, and that somebody was always a woman. She was a whore. She was a harlot. She tempted me with her soft words and with her lips. It makes me think, can you take any responsibility whatsoever for what you did?
By my math, Chris Watts is still cooling his heels in year 7 of a very long lifetime behind bars. And good riddance. Another case that really got under our skin, a Connecticut real estate developer named Fotis Dulos. Jennifer Dulos was Fotis's second wife and the mother of his 5 kids. But Fotis already had his eyes on perhaps wife number 3. Jennifer was divorcing him, and he was in full control mode. That's when Jennifer suddenly vanished, May 24th, 2019. She was last seen after dropping their children off at school. Fotis was a suspect from the start, but he denied everything. And he insisted that his estranged wife was alive and had probably just run off. Yeah, a mother of 5 kids, including 2 sets of twins, all under the age of 13, just run off. It was not long before Fotis turned up on surveillance video, stuffing garbage bags into dozens and dozens of trash bins along a dark, long stretch of road in Hartford, Connecticut. And inside those bags, zip ties, gloves, cleaning supplies, and clothing, along with DNA and blood belonging to Jennifer and her husband. Fotis had borrowed an employee's truck the day Jennifer disappeared, and when he returned that truck, professionally cleaned, I might add, he told the employee to replace the front seats and to get rid of the old ones. The employee did as he was told, but sensing something wasn't on the up and up, he held on to those old car seats, and good thing he did, because police found Jennifer's DNA was all over the passenger seat. In January of 2020, Fotis Dulos was charged with capital murder and kidnapping. But he never stood trial because the coward that he was, he took his own life while out on bail. That left 2 accomplices to face the music alone. His girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, and his former attorney, Kent Mawhinney, were both charged with conspiracy to kill Jennifer. In May of last year, the girlfriend, Michelle Troconis, was sentenced to 14.5 years in prison. But hey, at least she avoided becoming wife number 3. In June of this year, Kent Mawhinney copped to a lesser charge and was sentenced to time served, which is, close to half a decade. The same day Michelle Troconis was convicted, her attorney, John Schoenhorn, was a guest on this program, and he said the jury just didn't believe her.
I think it all comes down to the conclusion that she must have made false statements during the interrogations. And again, that's 2 weeks later, and she still denied any knowledge throughout all three of those interrogations from June 2nd, June 6th, and August 13th, knowing what he had planned. They tried every trick in the book in terms of interrogation techniques, lying to her, cutting her off, telling her things that her memory was false, all the things that I thought I hoped the jury would understand, playing on her language deficiencies. It apparently did not.
Michelle won't be eligible for parole until at least 2038. And that brings me to Scott Peterson. His very pregnant wife, Lacey, disappeared on Christmas Eve 2002 in Modesto, California. Scott told the police that he last saw her around 9:30 in the morning when he left to go fishing that day. He said when he got back in the afternoon, Lacey's car was in the driveway, but the house was empty. Detectives found Lacey's keys, her wallet, her sunglasses, and her purse in a closet inside the house. But there was no sign of Lacey. Their dog was also found wandering the neighborhood with his leash still on. Scott was an obvious suspect, even more so after a woman named Amber Fry came forward and said she was Scott's mistress. She also said when they met, Scott told her he was single, that his wife had recently died. The truth was Lacey was still very much alive when Scott met Amber, so there's big lie number one. The following April, 2 months after Lacey Peterson's due date, her remains and those of the couple's unborn son, Connor, were found 1 mile apart on the shoreline of San Francisco Bay. 5 days later, Scott Peterson was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder with premeditation and special circumstances. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. But later, that sentence was changed to life without parole. And in 2024, the LA Innocence Project agreed to take up Peterson's case, citing evidence that police had overlooked or had never known about. But this past June, a California Court of Appeals denied their bid for a new trial. Still to come, some killers don't deny that they did it. They just lie about why they did it. And self-defense is usually the lie of choice. Certainly the last resort for a killer who's caught dead to rights. Coming up, a couple of lowlifes whose desperation you can hear and even feel as our special report, Liar, Liar, continues after this. Welcome back to our special Liar, Liar, live from CrimeCon 2025 in Denver. With all due respect to fight or flight, when most of us find ourselves cornered by teachers, by spouses, or especially by police, our first instinct is to deny. We didn't do it. We weren't even there. We don't even know the guy, the other kid, the other woman, or the guy who got shot. But oftentimes the evidence tells a very different story, like the truth. But even then, a few murder suspects find another card to play. They no longer deny that they pulled the trigger or plunged the knife or mixed the poison. They just deny it was quote unquote murder. In other words, they play the self-defense card, which is sometimes valid and sometimes not. And if they gave out trophies for the most bogus denials of all time, Jodi Arias would need a warehouse to store all of hers. The only way that I can describe how Jodi Arias killed her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, in June of 2008 is overkill. She stabbed him 27 times. She slit his throat, and then she shot him in the head for good measure, all while he was taking a shower. Initially, she said she was nowhere near Travis Alexander's home at the time that he died, that she hadn't seen him in months. But then police, found photos of the couple in suggestive poses taken on Travis's last day alive. They also found Jodi's DNA in a bloody palm print on a wall at the murder scene. At which point, yeah, Jodi Arias changed her story. She told police that intruders had broken in to Travis's home, murdering him and attacking her. There was no evidence of a break-in. So, natch. Arias changed her story again. And this time, she admitted that she did it, that she killed Travis. She herself did it. But she also said she had a reason for lying about it for so long. Say it with me, everybody. Self-defense. Arias said that she stabbed and slashed and shot her boyfriend while he was in the shower because she feared him. She claimed that she'd been a victim of domestic abuse. Travis being the abuser, she said. Her trial was nothing short of a media circus. It lasted 4 months, with Jodi Arias taking the witness stand for 18 days. 18 days of exquisite lying. Not surprisingly, her trial ended with a conviction, murder one, though the jury condemned her to a life behind bars instead of death row. Years later, her attorney told me how lying cost Jodi Arias her freedom, not to mention murdering Travis. Was this all her doing? Like, I'm getting up there, I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to be Jodi, I wiggle my way into anything and I get what I want? Or how did that turn out?
Well, ultimately, you know, Ashleigh, that's attorney-client privilege. I have written a book, and I'm not practicing anymore. But I think my book was the ethical response to some of the lies she told about me afterwards. Obviously, Miss Arias is a world-renowned liar. She's told lies about all sorts of people. But ultimately, you know, a client makes their own decision. An attorney can advise; they can't control. And I guess I'm going to have to leave my answer at that with her motion for post-conviction relief against me still pending.
Imagine what it must have been like for Kirk Nurmi to represent that pathological liar. Well, at least he never had to defend Sarah Boone, although many other lawyers did, or at least they tried to. There were 9 by our count, 8 of whom quit after Sarah Boone skewered them in rambling letters to the judge, and sometimes straight to the judge's faces. She never seemed to realize that she needed all the legal help that she could get. The state of Florida had charged her with second-degree murder after her boyfriend, George Torres Jr., suffocated inside a zipped-up suitcase with Sarah being the zipper. Like Jodi Arias, Boone changed her story every single time she needed to, you know, because of evidence. At first, she said that she and George had been drinking and that they both thought it would be funny to play hide and seek because, you know, grown-ups. The hide and seek part being George hiding in a suitcase. She said he climbed in of his own free will, laughing all the way, and that she just simply went upstairs and passed out after that. And that version might have actually prevailed were it not for the video that Boone herself shot on her iPhone. Video of George struggling to breathe, begging Sarah over and over to please let him out, with Sarah Boone taunting him in return.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
F you.
Sarah.
F you.
Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah. I can't fucking breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you choke me.
Sarah. 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 Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah.
Real or ransom. Might want to get video for it extra. Because I got this.
Sarah.
Real or ransom.
Sarah. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you drink on me.
Every time I see that. Boone actually took the stand during her own trial, and she said she did, in fact, zip George into the suitcase in a playful way, but she claimed the fun stopped when George threatened her, and that suddenly she was afraid that he'd kill her if she let him out, which still didn't really match what the video showed, did it? But at least there was some precedent. George Torres had been arrested 4 times over the years for domestic violence. But still, the jury didn't buy self-defense, and Sarah Boone was found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, to endless days of regret for what she probably considers the biggest mistake of her life. Not killing George Torres, but turning down a plea deal that would have had her out of prison in just 15 years. Attorney number 9 for Sarah Boone came on this program hours after she was found guilty. I had made a bet that the jury would come back under 2 hours, and they did. I found her wholly dislikable all through the entire process, from the moment she was arrested to the moment she was convicted. I can't imagine I'm alone. Everyone I've spoken to who's been following the case, albeit not in the courtroom, has said the same thing. They'll throw the book at her. Why did your client and why did you feel that that wasn't going to happen?
Well, she actually did pretty good on the stand if you watch her testimony. As far as Sarah goes, she actually did pretty good, I felt like. But, you know, ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, the decision as to whether or not to accept a plea offer or to take the case to trial is ultimately only the client's decision. You know, we can tell, lawyer can tell her the pros and cons and the strengths and weaknesses of her position versus the state's position.
Sure. Did you recommend to her to take the deal and she went against your recommendation? Because knowing how she's been with the last, 8 trial attorneys who, she spent before you, I would imagine that would be a scenario I'd believe.
Well, we talked about it in depth, and I try not to give my opinion initially. I want them to try to make the decision on their own, and then if they ask me for my opinion, then I give it to them based on my.
She?
Yes.
What'd you say?
Well, that was something that I suggested she strongly consider, was that plea. I think with 15 years, you do 80% of that sentence here in Florida, plus she'd done already 4.5 years. So she would have had, I think, about 8 years to do.
Instead, she got life. Still ahead tonight, I didn't do it. It was the SOG, as in some other guy. It is another oldie but goodie in the criminal suspects hit parade. Nothing says reasonable doubt like an alternate suspect, even if that person is concocted out of thin air. So kick off your shoes and roll up your pants. The BS is gonna get deep when we get back. Since 1994, one of the plainest, most unassuming names in the Western world has been synonymous with horrific cruelty. In that year, a woman in South Carolina named Susan Smith drowned her 2 young sons by rolling her car into a lake with 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alex still strapped into their car seats inside. She told police that a black man had carjacked her and kidnapped those babies. And she kept that story up for 9 days while pleading on national television for the kids' safe return.
I would like to say to whoever has my children, that they please bring them home to us where they belong.
Police never believed Susan Smith. And finally, she admitted the whole black carjacker story was garbage and that she was the one who drowned those 2 little boys. In 1995, she was found guilty and sentenced to 2 back-to-back life terms. But they did say she was allowed to seek parole after 30 years of being locked up. And last November, that 30 years came due, and she got her hearing. And the answer came back quickly: no. Another mom who thought she had it all figured out was all the way over on the West Coast, Sherry Papini. She too invented a fall guy in a blockbuster kidnapping case, her own kidnapping case. Sherry Papini disappeared on November of 2016 while jogging near her home in Redding, California. But she reappeared 3 weeks later on Thanksgiving Day, claiming that her kidnappers had tossed her out of the van. Badly beaten, she still was in her restraints. Very dramatic. She told police that 2 Hispanic women had snatched her and held her captive. But soon enough, it emerged that she'd been cheating on her husband by shacking up with a former boyfriend. Sherry Papini was arrested, and 6 weeks later, she pleaded guilty to 1 count of mail fraud and 1 count of making false statements. She got 18 months in prison, and last month, she published a book called Sherry Papini Doesn't Exist: The Lie That Defined Me, the Media That Destroyed Me, and the Truth That No One Heard. And just what is Sherry Papini's latest version of the truth? Oh, it turns out it's pretty rich. It's that she really was kidnapped by the ex-boyfriend with whom she was staying. Never mind all that admission stuff that she made in a court of law before she served a sentence. The showbiz blogger Perez Hilton was my guest when that book came out.
In the past, the mother has said that my daughter, Sherry Papini, made up false allegations against me, claiming that she was abusing her daughter, which is not true, according to the mom. Also, other ex-boyfriends of Sherry have said that she has historically been a pathological liar. So, oh, wow, she's taking a lie detector test now, which is easily, cheated. I don't take much weight in that. And she claims to not remember how she was kidnapped or the very long drive from Redding, California to Costa Mesa. That's from Northern California to Orange County. She conveniently forgot that an 8-hour drive, 6-hour drive. I don't know how long, very long.
Good luck with all your future stories, Sherry. And speaking of stories, one of the most exquisite liars I have ever encountered in my decades of reporting was a young Florida mom whose little girl had just gone missing. Only this mom didn't seem to be too worried about it. She didn't even say boo, not a peep, the day that her nanny supposedly made off with her baby. That was the story that she told police anyway. No, Casey Anthony didn't say a word about her missing 2-year-old Kaylee. Not until the grandparents pinned Casey down and asked her, where the hell is the little baby girl who lives with us, but whom we have not seen in a month? Good question. And it was the same question everyone else was soon demanding to know. On July 15th, 2008, Casey's daughter was finally reported missing, but not by Casey, by Casey's mom, Kaylee's grandmother, Cindy Anthony. Casey had suggested some ridiculous story that Kaylee was kidnapped by a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. Zanny the nanny, she called her. But police found zero evidence any such person existed. And 3 months later, with Kaylee still missing, Casey was charged with first-degree murder. The tiny little victim was eventually found 6 months later, in December, wrapped in a blanket inside a laundry bag in a wooded area just blocks from the Anthony family home. But somehow, 2.5 years later, in July of 2011, Casey Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. She was, however, found guilty of lying to the police a misdemeanor, time served. And Casey has been out ever since. But who knows if she's turned to a life of truth. So lying doesn't always start when the cuffs go on. Sometimes the lies are the crime itself, and the motive is money. Up next, the con jobs, the power suits and the polished pitches that separated millions of people from billions and billions of dollars, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley to Main Street, USA. Welcome back, everyone, to Liar, Liar. If I'm being honest, fake it till you make it is not the worst advice I ever got. I may or may not have said it myself to other people, but whoever said it to Anna Delvey, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Anna Delvey was born Anna Sorokin to a working-class Russian family living in Germany. There is no crime in wanting more. But Anna never got past the faking part of it. She created an image for herself as a pampered heiress to a fictional Russian billionaire, but also a diplomat and an energy tycoon, depending on the day. She wore the finest clothes, she ate at the finest restaurants, and she hopscotched the world in private jets, rarely paying for anything herself. Some in her Manhattan circle thought that she was royalty. She wooed them with grandiose plans for the Anna Delvey Foundation, a combination art gallery and private club, and she happily accepted investments/donations. But then came Morocco, a $60,000 five-star vacation in Marrakesh. At one stop on the trip, her own credit card was declined, so she told a friend, "Just put it on your Amex and I'll pay you back." But Anna never paid her back, and that friend, a photo editor for Vanity Fair, ended up blowing the whistle. In 2019, Anna Sorokin Delvey was convicted of grand larceny and theft. She went to prison, then to immigration detention, and right now is under house arrest in Manhattan, fighting deportation to Germany. She and her ankle monitor passed the days hosting dinner parties and staging photo shoots, sometimes with little bunny rabbits. And it was fun while it lasted, I'm guessing. But in her best month, Anna Delvey never made the kind of bank that Bernie Madoff made in a New York minute. Bernard L. Madoff, investor, securities, was Bernie's brainchild and his life's work. He made money for clients when everybody else was going broke. Housing meltdown? Banks collapsing? Not for Bernie's clients, because they always made money on their investments. They always beat the market, and not by a little, by a long shot. At his fund, the bull market never ended. Until one day, the bull market ended. Actually, bull market all came crashing down on top of him, but just on top of him.
Fixture on Wall Street, Bernie Madoff, 70 years old, arrested by the FBI.
Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme. This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Others around Bernie ended up suffering as well. But it turns out Bernard L. Madoff Investor Securities wasn't technically investing anything and was anything but secure. The genius money man who unbelievably once chaired the NASDAQ, who managed the assets of celebrities and foundations and best friends and the children of best friends and even Holocaust survivors. He was just running a Ponzi scheme, the largest Ponzi scheme in American history. He used the money from new clients to pay hefty returns to old clients and to himself. There was really nothing genius about it. It was just criminal. And when the flow of new clients dried up, and the banks and the feds got wise, the house of cards, the house of Bernie's cards, imploded. And $65 billion entrusted to Bernie Madoff, poof, it was gone. In 2009, he pleaded guilty to fraud, money laundering, and perjury. And Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. And that is where Bernie Madoff died in 2021 at the age of 82. But a decade after Madoff came a new kind of con. Younger, sleeker, tech-savvy, and literally out for blood. A whiz kid named Elizabeth Holmes. She said she was building the future of medicine, a device that could diagnose cancer, HIV, even heart conditions with just one single drop of blood, and a test that could be done at your local drugstore. What could go wrong? She called her invention Theranos, and Elizabeth was everywhere, like Steve Jobs everywhere. She was on the cover of magazines, she keynoted tech conferences, she hobnobbed at the White House, and investors handed her almost $1 billion. And it was all a hoax. That device that she was touting didn't work. Never worked. That's the most incredible thing. The lab techs ended up blowing the whistle on her, and in 2018, Elizabeth Holmes was indicted. And in 2022, she was convicted of defrauding investors. Elizabeth was sentenced to 11 years in prison. A long, long fall for the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. Just ahead, the most unhinged lie of the hour. Henry Lee Lucas claimed to have murdered 600 people. But the true number? Actually, not even close. Were there fewer? Were there more? How many victims did he really have? The answer and the unimaginable lies coming up next. Welcome back to Liar Liar from CrimeCon in Denver, CrimeCon 2025. Henry Lee Lucas had a wretched, miserable life and more than paid it forward. In 1960, he killed his own mother by stabbing her in the neck. He was sentenced to 40 years in a Michigan prison, but because of overcrowding, Henry Lucas was released after only 10 years. In 1983, he was arrested on a weapons charge in Texas. And there, he confessed to killing a 15-year-old girl and an 82-year-old woman and led police to their bodies. But Henry Lee Lucas didn't stop there. He just kept on confessing to murder after murder after murder, a lot of murders. He told police he killed 60 people. And then he upped the number to 100 people. And finally, he topped out at 600 people. 600 individual murders, making Henry Lee Lucas easily the most prolific serial killer in American history, if it were true. Police across the country started closing cold cases right and left. But in Texas, Lucas was convicted of 11 murders and sentenced to death for one of them. And that's when reporters with the Dallas Times-Herald started asking some pretty obvious questions. How could one person kill 600 people over 10 years and not be on anyone's radar? How was Henry Lee Lucas able to cover almost 11,000 miles in 1 month to commit some of the murders that he copped to? How did Lucas kill somebody in Texas while he was living and working in Florida? And why was he allowed to review the case files and, quote, refresh his memory during police interrogations? It was finally determined that Henry Lee Lucas probably just did the first 3 murders and lied about all the rest. But later he claimed all of his confessions were a hoax and that the only life he ever took was that of his mother. His death sentence was commuted to life in prison. And in 2001, Henry Lee Lucas died there in prison of natural causes at the age of 64. Maybe, just maybe, taking even more secrets and lies to his grave. But maybe not, because after all, liar, liar. That does it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Please check out my podcast, Drop Dead Serious. Loads and loads of episodes, including a lot of liars. FOMO starts next.